Howdy, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's make sure this is functioning as it should. Was wondering if I was going to be able to get a live off the ground this month, end of the month before the new year, so to say. Happy I could kind of figure this out and get it slotted in. All right, perfect. Okay. So, yeah, welcome. Thanks for being here for another episode in the Radium series. What are we at now? This is number 15. Wow, crazy. I don't know how many of those are lives. Hmm, I didn't realize it was so many. It's been a long time. It's been since October since I've done another Radium episode, so long time coming. But yeah, give some time for everybody to get in here. Um, make sure I got all my material ready. As you can see by the thumbnail, the Philosopher's Stone is going to be the theme of this episode. Got two lengthy articles here. We're going to kind of dabble a little bit, um, cross some old material in a sense, discuss attributes that we've seen before. Um, but yeah, kind of from a different lens as always. So, run through here. Tonavi, if you're still here, welcome. The Elder, Five Leaf Clover, Jake, Terry, Ballhead, True Earth Norseman, Modoc Rough Stock. Welcome from McDermott, Oregon. Thanks for being here, guys. Not a lot of time for me tonight. Not a lot of time in general with the holidays. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever it is that you participate in. Time with family, time away from work, hopefully. Perhaps some good stargazing. Um, yeah, and we're coming to the end of the year. Hopefully, some of you got a chance to check out my last video, Astroloday, where I read an article, two articles. The first one is just one of my all-time favorites, where I talk about the astrological significance of the holy days, right? Holiday, holy day. I'm sure that's not lost on many of you, but it's amazing how many people I say that to, and they go, "Oh my gosh, never realized." And that all of the holy days were astronomically um, significant and have their. I apologize if you notice that flicker in the background. My 2-year-old was yanking on the lights. We're going green today for the radium. But yeah, so the flicker is a bit annoying. So I apologize ahead of time. But yeah, um, and if you haven't seen my material on radium, I definitely recommend it. Again, there's a playlist on my channel. This is the 15th episode. We have episodes ranging from an hour and a half to under half an hour. And all of them are quite interesting, I think. And so we got one. Well, there we go. We're going to change this. New Madrid. We're going to get that out of there. So it's the 14th installment. I had a out of place video in the playlist here. But yeah, just to roll through some of these for everybody. Radium to Cure the Ills of the World is episode 1. Episode 2 is my talk with um, Greg at the Higher Side Chats. Stay tuned. I got working on another chat with Greg. So for those that aren't familiar with the Higher Side Chats, that's definitely that's a first hour, hour and a half talk with him, where I kind of do a pretty good umbrella conversation about radium and several other subjects. Yeah, and I get into all kinds of stuff: biblical giants, dinosaurs. Um, the radium is the source of the sun, and the sun in the sky is just a giant ball of radium. Um, Radium mining, man, that's going to be a there's going to be a part two to that one eventually. Um, Maybe even more. The radium mining thing is going to take a while to fully expose all the material I have on that. But yeah. So again, 60 people in here. I think that's plenty to get going here and run back through here a little bit. Yeah, Dustin Wilson, welcome. Take a little pill. Take a trip with me. Take a little trip with me. Welcome, Walker Bear. Love you guys. Why are we not using radium? Well, radium and its ability for the public to get its hands on has been it's a controlled substance, controlled mineral, and there's a lot of yellow tape that goes along with it. In fact, all mining of it is controlled and regulated, and has been since World War I. But yeah, we'll get into more of the war effort correlation stuff in episodes to come when we start talking about a little bit further into World War I, the German Party, the German Syndicate, and yeah, connect a few more dots between the military industrial complex of America and what I think kickstarted World War I. But yeah, these are lengthy articles and a lot of material here, so let's jump right in. And as always, thanks for joining me, guys. Appreciate it very much. And this will probably be my last video um, of the year. I might have a short clip or two come out, but I'm making some big changes in January. I got a lot of time off work, and um, I'm going to be setting up a Patreon and finally getting back to kind of the original plan of the channel, and you know keeping the goal alive to provide two layers to my material, and um, create kind of a transition into a setup where those who are interested and looking for more of my own opinions and more material can find it and support me at the same time. Because as many of you know, finding time to do stuff like this is incredibly difficult, and the more um, support I can get, the more time I can take away from work and all the other things I have to support a family. But yeah, so stay tuned for that stuff. I'll make announcements middle of January, towards the end of January, and that material will be available probably first week of February. But yeah, so looking forward to it. Finally, gonna have some free time here. I haven't had more than a half an hour here or there, and since Anomalous America, Ohio, to actually sit down and put material together and pen to paper, so to say. Um, but yeah, here we go. We're gonna jump in, start sharing some of these. This one is from the New Yorker, 1913. Dream of ancient alchemists now a reality. Let's go full and get rid of my face. So yeah, if you didn't catch the drift from the thumbnail, today we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about alchemy and the idea of radium being the philosopher's stone. I've hinted at this in quite a few episodes, and we'll get into some more of the kind of their own verbiage when it comes to this idea. Three great chemists say they have produced neon and helium from substances in which they had not been known to be present. Really important. The helium connection is, I can't stress it enough, it's one of the most important. And I go over that in incredible detail in my um, Radium, the Source of the Sun video. Um, Remarkable. The kind of paradigm shift in thinking when it came to um, uncovering what this element's potential was and how it related directly to our own ball in the sky, and kind of uncovering the symbolic as well as kind of religious worship and, this sun worship and this nuclear and radium, um, you know, old world technology, so to say. The correlations are quite endless, and I've made some connections again that with that in Atlantis, but more to come there. But yes, helium being a byproduct of radium is really, really, really important. One of the most let's zoom in a little bit more for you guys. And again, 75 of you here, welcome. Kind of an impromptu live. That's kind of how things go in my life. Hey, I got free time. Free time isn't going to be planned a week out. It's going to be, shooting from the hip. Originally had this scheduled for 4 o'clock and then 4:30 and then 5, and here we are. We're making it work. So thanks for sticking with me and being patient through this whole process. One of the most romantic dreams of history promises soon to come true. The elusive hope of the ancients, the discovery of the philosopher's stone, the great magisterium, is being reduced to terms of advanced chemistry. The consuming desire of the medieval alchemist was to convert base metal into gold in quantities that would make them masters of the world. Now, I've talked about this also that, kind of the biblical stories and Jesus and Alpha and Omega and, the light of the world and the idea that many of these myths and gods and so on and so forth are really just kind of alchemical representations of the chemical, um, the material world and the um, platonic solids, many things, but that these elements are gods or were referred to as gods again. The literal mind is a curse, and in olden times, everything was mm, mm, so much metaphor, right? And it's important to understand that when we're talking about converting elements, and that the true alchemist wasn't, alchemy had nothing to do with actual physical material and converting things into gold. Certainly, that was something they discussed and was a potentiality. However, this was a internal uh, journey, so to say, and that's not just my opinion, but many of these alchemists, the literalization of alchemy is a kind of unfortunate downfall of all of this. Same thing with quote religions, but yeah, off subject. Gradually, their dream came to be de- derided, divided. Sorry, derided. It was classed with witchcraft, delusions, and a theory that the Earth was flat. I love that part. For 150 years, it lay on the shelf. Then came the discovery of Madame Curie, Mercury. Remember, she didn't discover the element, and its name radium wasn't given to it by her either. Of the new element radium and the subsequent discovery in 1908 by Sir William Ramsay of England, working in conjunction with Frederick Soddy, that this radium gave off a certain gaseous emanation, which, when captured and confined, was found to undergo a change. Now, I've talked about this when it comes to uranium glass and uranium mining in Bohemia. Radium was well understood and mined for hundreds of years. its classification and renaming by this Madame Curie Mercury character. That's all she is a character. And I've discussed that her funding was through the Standard Chemical Company, which had close relations with Standard Oil, and also their mining front. So, um, you got mining, you got medicine, you got oil, gas, and of course, minerals. But yeah, working in conjunction with Frederick Soddy, that this radium gave off a certain gaseous emanation, which, when captured and confined, was found to undergo a change. Now, again, we talk about these emanations in several of my other episodes. So, again, if you enjoy this material, I strongly recommend going back through some of the material there. The emanations is really important. In fact, I have a video where they talk about the source of lightning and weather is directly related to radium and its emanations, as well as the oceans are filled with radium. And the reaction between the ball of radium in the sky and the radium in the water plays a huge role in weather patterns. This transformation amounted to transmutation of elements, and scientists were therefore more or less prepared for the epoch making announcement made a few days ago by Sir William Ramsay, Professor Norman Colley of the University College London, and Professor H. Patterson of Leeds University, that their recent experiments had apparently accomplished the transmutation of elements in still another way, inasmuch as they had produced neon and helium from substances in which they were previously not known to be present. These astonishing revelations were made at a meeting of the Chemical Society of England, when a specially prepared paper was read by Sir William and a joint paper by Professors Colley and Patterson. Professor Ramsay's experiments. Professor Ramsay had previously conducted experiments with half a gram of radium bromide, and by its aid, though he had succeeded in transmuting copper into lithium, silicon, titanium, and zirconium, and thorium into carbon, he also obtained neon from water. Really important. It's exactly what we were discussing earlier. This, I think they were very well aware of the radium water. Again, this is my Elixir of Life video and the Fountain of Youth, and how all these things are directly related to radium. And pulling neon out of water was, kind of the predecessor to those experiments that came in the 20s. This apparent transmutation led him to seek the cause, and suspecting that the same results might be achieved by the use of some other form of energy, he investigated the contents of used X ray bulbs. At the same time, Professors Colley and Patterson were making similar investigations, but all three entirely independent of one another. In all of these experiments, the gas helium was found in the bulbs, and its presence could not be explained. Sometimes the element neon was first observed to be present from an unknown source, and later it disappeared and in its place was taken by helium. As interpreted by the experiments, these results indicated that the cathode ray in the bulb had converted the elements already contained in the apparatus into neon and helium, or that the electricity itself in the form of electrons had built up the neon and the helium. Really important. Tesla's work eventually gets into things like this. Excuse me. I may be paid a visit by one of my children, so be prepared. Where was I? Professor Colley was very enthusiastic as to the possible results of the discovery, and declared his belief that the dreams of the ancient alchemists might soon be fulfilled. What's up, bud? Yeah? You're going to hear my little one in the background. Yeah, I got to wear my headphones, Bubba. It's okay. The announcement of the three English chemists aroused a keen interest everywhere, and the Tribune man called on a number of distinguished scientists in New York to learn their opinions of the reported achievement. He found a wide variety of attitude, extending from extreme skepticism to a ready belief. Now, another thing that I wanted to touch on was the importance of kind of keeping this radium veiled, and its purpose and its use, and the substances in which it was found veiled. This allowed the Germans to mine radium at will at pennies on the dollar for about 20 years. They realized they had been running their sources low in Europe, Bohemia, Austria, Poland, so on and so forth, and they had bought up a insane amount of property here in the United States as well as South America, and were undergoing extreme mining operations to grab as much of this as humanly possible until, again, the until all of this was broken, so to say, out into the mainstream, and their land deeds were taken from them and their mining operations shut down. So the dating of all of this is very purposeful, and the time frames going up to World War I are crucial. But back to the article. Where was I? Apologize. The announcement. Okay, yeah. Open to conviction. Professor Alexander Smith, head of the chemistry department at Columbia University, was strongly inclined to credit the result as announced in the cabled reports from London. In view of the fact that Professor Ramsay had already discovered that radium emanation changes into helium, said Professor Smith, the announcement that he and his co laborers have achieved the transmutation of elements in some other way would be startling. If Professor Ramsay performed this experiment himself and announced the results as indicated in cabled reports, I would accept his conclusions without question. His skill in experimenting is marvelous. In fact, he is probably far more skillful in conducting experiments in the chemical laboratory than anyone else. He would automatically take precautions against failure or error that others would entirely overlook. The transmutation of radium emanations into the element helium is what may be called an automatic transmutation. But in these later experiments, the transmutation is apparently produced by mechanical aids. And since electricity can be produced cheaply, it is reasonable to suppose that if transmutation of other elements is achieved by the same process, the expense involved will not prohibit its commercial application. Yeah, and the use of magnetism and, again, ether priming, all these different things they were doing with large voltages and radium is it's quite crazy, and that'll come later down the road in the time frame of all of this. The imagination can run riot in this field, and the ultimate conversion of the energy of Niagara Falls into gold is conceivable, though of course removed an infinite distance from the reality of achievement. Again, that is not at all what they were doing, but eventually the government gets a hold of all of this, and I do believe there were already plans uh, and experiments going on behind the scenes. Professor Ramsay's announcement fits in with the new theory that electricity itself may be composed of atoms, which have been called electrons, and that the atoms of all the elements may be composed of electrons packed together in different proportions and differently arranged. Thus, the electrons in the course of laboratory experiments may undergo the rearrangement necessary to produce different elements. Mr. M.I. Pupin, professor of electromechanics at Columbia, took a very different view of the announcement. He was extremely skeptical and cited the experiments made among the same line by Sir Joseph J. Thomson, professor of chemistry in Cambridge University, England. He believed, he said, with Professor Thomson, that the results of the experiments made by Ramsay, Cawley, and Patterson indicated that the source of the neon and helium discovered was to be found in the glass of the apparatus or in the electrodes, and that nothing comparable with the synthesis of elements was taking place. Dr. Charles F. Chandler, professor emeritus of chemistry at Columbia, declared that he by no means doubted the possibility of transmuting elements in view of the previous experiments carried on by Sir William Ramsay with radium. Oh, Robin, thank you very much, and 128 of you guys. Thanks for joining me on short notice, and I hope you're enjoying the material so far. And You're gonna get a little bit of the 2-year-old here. My 2 lotion containers are fighting while I talk, so pardon the background noise. In taking it to the writer, he summed up in very clear fashion the long established atomic theory and its relation to the new theory of electrons and to possible transmutation of elements. Let us suppose, began Dr. Chandler, that the announcement that has appeared in the papers here that Sir William Ramsay and his co laborers have succeeded in irradiating neon and helium either out of some other element or out of the ether is true. What then will be the effect of this achievement on the atomic theory that has held sway for centuries among chemists? Will it prove to have been a fallacy founded on a lack of knowledge? And shall we have to abandon it, or will it continue to be accepted? In my opinion, it will continue to be accepted, but it will be further developed and extended, and the definition of the atom will be somewhat modified. To understand how these changes can come about, there must be a clear conception of the atomic theory as it is now held. What is the atomic theory and how did it originate? Important questions right there for sure. And remember the time frame, you guys. I mean, these experiments with radium led to so many. I mean, the snowball effect with some of these experiments were insane, and the elements that would come down the road from these, it's quite staggering. When chemists began to use the balance in connection with their experiments and investigations, they weighed the materials they employed and they weighed the products which were yielded by their experiments. It wasn't long, therefore, before they made this very remarkable discovery, namely, that when they brought different substances into contact, there were two different kinds of product which resulted. First, when they mixed, for example, sulfur and copper, no matter how finely and pulverized them, even though the microscope hardly showed the separate particles of sulfur and copper, they could nevertheless dissolve out the sulfur and leave the copper behind, just as they could with a mixture of sugar and sand. But second, when they heated the mixture of sulfur and copper, a remarkable change occurred, and afterward it was impossible to dissolve out the sulfur away from the copper, and the product was entirely different from either. They call this product sulfur sulfide of copper. It began by being a mixture of sulfur and copper, but it ended by becoming a chemical compound of sulfur and copper. So yeah, the mixing of compounds, it starts with the radium, and these radium experiments are not only the kind of breaking turning point, uh, but it leads to a whole new um, field of study where they can kind of hybridize all these different chemical compounds. The next step in the line of investigation was the discovery that whenever substances entered into chemical combination, the resulting compound had a definite chemical composition. Thus, whenever hydrogen burned in chlorine gas, the product, which was called hydrochloric acid, contained 1 part of hydrogen and 33 and a half parts of chlorine. Subsequent investigations show that every chemical compound always contains the same bodies in the same proportions, and this is known as the law of constancy of composition. My apologies. It was subsequently found that it sometimes happened that an element might unite with another element in several different proportions, and that when this occurred, it was invariably the case that these proportions bore to each other a very simple multiple ratio of whole numbers. You ask, what is an element? It is a chemical substance which has never been resolved into two or more component substances. There are 84 of them at present recognized, and the amount, how the table shifted in the early 1900s was incredible, and due very much again to these experiments. You ask me what significance attaches to the fact that the elements combine in definite proportions, and that when those proportions are studied, the ratios with which one unites with another are simple multitudes. My answer is that these are the facts upon which Dr. Dalton based the atomic theory. These numbers represent the comparative weights of atoms. This is the idea of the atom. It is a certain minute particle of an element which has a certain definite weight, which we express in numbers. This brings to mind my Origins of CERN video. I think it's 2 episodes back. Again, the origins of CERN, CERN as we know it today, the particle, the Hadron Collider, the God particle, all of these things, these all extenuated from the study of radium and these colliding of different things. And so, yeah, definitely check that out if you haven't seen it yet. In the old tables, which are the simplest, the starting point is hydrogen, which is called 1. These atoms can unite with each other to form chemical compounds only in multitudes of atoms. In other words, in ordinary chemical reactions, we have no such things as fractions of atoms. When the elements unite, one or more whole atoms of one element unite with one or more whole atoms of another element. And these groups of atoms held together by chemical affinity are called molecules. Thus, a molecule of water contains 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. A molecule of sugar contains 12 atoms of carbon, 22 atoms of hydrogen, and 11 atoms of oxygen, etc. This was our idea of atoms prior to Madame Curie's discovery of radium. And before we learned the results of the wonderful investigations that have since been made, it has been discovered that radium is an element of very high atomic weight, namely 226.4. It has been further discovered that radium gradually disintegrates. In other words, the atoms of radium go to pieces and the fragments appear as atoms of new elements with smaller atomic weights until finally helium is reached with an atomic weight of only 4. This is a process of the disintegration of atoms and was discovered by Sir William Ramsay in conjunction with Frederick Soddy in 1903. Um, I've covered a little bit a bit of these experiments in previous videos, but very, very important. This kind of half life and um, the disintegration into pieces and fragments of other elements. It's quite staggering. I realize that these are things that quite simple ideas now, but in the early 1900s, and again, as I stated before, the Germans had about a 25-year head start, and so where were they in this whole process? You can only imagine. I mean, again, their flying machines and their submarines were already running perpetual radium engines. Um, their famous craft zeppelins and many other devices. I'm sure that we don't even know about. Some of their quote flying saucer um, vehicles. I'm sure we're implementing the same technology. This, of course, compels us to adopt a new conception of atoms, and consequently, it has been necessary to conclude that, although under ordinary circumstances atoms appear as individual particles or units in forming chemical compounds, they are, nevertheless, made up of a large number of smaller particles, which we may call electrons. Thus, it appears that under certain unusual conditions, an atom may go to pieces and its electrons may part company, and that some of them may thereupon unite to form atoms of a smaller weight than the original atom. This is kind of where the chain reaction, cold fusion, and a lot of other concepts stem again from controlling this disintegration and how they could not only utilize it for weapons, which is an important thing, but that's what comes to most people's mind. But also all kinds of um, propulsion and industry. Thus, it appears that under certain unusual conditions, an atom may go to pieces, like I stated, form atoms of smaller weight than the original atoms, as in the disintegration of radium down to helium. The novelty of Sir William Ramsay's announcement made a few days ago consists in the apparent building up of complex atoms from single ones. Professor Ramsay believes that he has succeeded in converting hydrogen atoms, having an atomic weight of 1, into helium atoms having an atomic weight of 4. Now, this is again why it was so important to study and analyze and really break down this disintegration, and that through the use of radium, they could then climb back vertically up the atomic scale, which is where it gets really interesting. And into neon atoms having an atomic weight of 20, thus creating complex atoms out of simple ones. This is kind of the Ouroboros, the feedback loop, so to say, that they could using radium, they could run down the atomic scale and right back up it, and kind of create this feedback, um, endless amount of energy, so to say. And you could manipulate this and control this and create all kinds of incredible things. Of course, we have transmutation of elements in either case, whether we split up complex atoms into simpler ones or combine the electrons of simple atoms into larger and more complex atoms. The ancients claimed to transmute some elements into others, such as base metals into gold, but they never presented any evidence sufficiently conclusive to establish their contention. Now, I've talked about this in one of my videos, the Cerebrus, the symbology of the scarab beetle. It's not in my radium playlist. You can find that in my my library. And I talk about the symbolic nature of symbols and how these gods um, were one and the same with some of these elements, and that the scarab beetle being a representation of um, the disintegration of radium. The scarab beetle is a solar symbol, but when you study the actual makeup of the beetle and what the beetle does and the metaphors behind the beetle rolling the dung and all of these things, it's like it's like 4D. And in my opinion, it's a perfect symbolic representation of radium and its disintegration, all the way down into element one. Actual transmutation. And again, 144 of you here. I appreciate you guys very much. I do realize again the language here is a bit difficult, as with many of my radium articles. The language is a bit difficult and can be a little boring and tedious. So I appreciate you sticking with me. Um, but yeah, really important, finer kind of fine tooth comb here in this article where we get a little bit more into it. And again, understanding their realization that with radium you could slide down from 226 weight all the way back up the scale. Really important. This is going to be, again, going back to the origins of CERN and all of these things and creating these kind of everlasting perpetual engines. You can see how radium would be used to not only manipulate magnetism and ether, but electricity and so many other things. Sir William Ramsay's conversion of radium into helium and what appears to be the conversion of hydrogen into helium and neon, is literally transmutation. So yeah, he was able to go up and down the scale. So people were doubting that this is even possible, but he was able to go up the scale and go down the scale and do it with all different kinds of material just by the aid of radium. If subsequent investigations show that he is justified in his announcement, there is no theoretical reason why the transmutation of the ancients may not be verified, or why some process may not be discovered by which the base metals may be transmuted into silver and gold. The analogy thus drawn between the achievements of chemists now and the vain search of the alchemists of old recalls the remarkable careers that were led by some of those ancients who succeeded in convincing their wealthy and royal patrons that they had found the great secret of transmutation. The idea is very old, and the first account of alleged transmutation of elements is found in Suidas. a Byzantine author of the 10th century. In the 5th century, however, the Greeks, who were then living in Egypt, were industrious seekers in the field of alchemy. The theory, now, again, just hopscotching to my Anomalous America Ohio episode, I get I go pretty deep into the idea that the origins of the Greeks along the Mississippi Valley, and that when a farmer was passing by the riverbank, he saw an area that had been washed away and something protruding from the soil. In that soil, he found a perfectly carved dodecahedron, perfect in all, perfect in its geometry was flawless, carved out of an incredibly um, dense marble, incredibly hard to carve, and that these, the idea of Egypt being, here in America, and all of these other things, and these markers to the reality that the land of Kemet um, was here along the shores of the Mississippi. Off subject here, but I just wanted to talk about that dodecahedron that they found, 20 feet below ground in a riverbank in Ohio. Quite remarkable. The theory that the baser metals could be transmuted into gold or silver had many followers. There were many who believed in the theory, and many who even claimed that they had accomplished such a thing. In those times, when little was known of practical chemistry, compounds were undoubtedly made which resembled gold and silver. As the knowledge of practical chemistry was limited, these newly formed compounds could not be resolved into their component parts. Hence, they were very naturally considered as single elements, and as they resembled gold and no means to differentiating them chemically. Now, again, I've kind of shown how this is a bit of a fallacy. In fact, they find in many of these mounds and temples, from Palenque all the way up into Michigan, they find not only brass and copper, but iron, and all in an insanely purified state. Meaning their knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry were very advanced, and they were able to purify and remove literally 99 90 to a 99.9% pure state, many different metals, gold, silver, copper, iron, many things. So I do believe that they had very, very advanced uh, chemical chemistry abilities, and kind of, touching all the way back to the Atlantis theory that I've covered several times, and that radium was their sacred um, element, and that all of the flying ships of the Atlanteans were phosphorescent, and they glow of purple and greens and all these different colors, and that I do believe they were using some kind of radium propulsion. Whether or not you believe in Atlantis or not, I do believe this advanced technology did exist at one point in our past. The articles of faith in which the ancients believed are very curious, and they are here presented. This is a pretty wonderful little part here. There exists a preparation, solid in form and red in color, called the Philosopher's Stone, the Grand Elixir, the Red Tincture, which, when it is placed in very small doses on melted liquid silver, mercury, lead, or some other common metal, causes a transmutation of the same into gold. 2. The same preparation used in very small doses as a medicine cures all diseases, rejuvenates the old, and prolongs life. Wherefore it is called the panacea of life, and, since it contains the essence of gold, aurum potable. There is another preparation of a white color called the stone of the second degree, the little elixir, the white tincture, which is equal to the first in half a degree of perfection and changes the common metals into silver. The charlatan. Among the many seekers after these two elixirs, it was, of course, to be expected that there would spring up many charlatans who would prey upon the credulity, credulity of their fellow men. I apologize. Photocopies can be poopy. Where was I? The three greatest swindling alchemists of history were the Count of Saint Germain, Cauglius Tro, and a man whom it seems strange to find playing such a role, the Imitable and Amoris Casanova. The Count of Saint Germain is variously described as a Portuguese Jew, a Spanish Jesuit, an Alassian, and the son of a Saviored tax collector. He was born about the year 1700. After 1750, he is found moving in high society in different capitals under various names, and with the title of Count, Cavalier, or Prince. In Paris, he succeeded in gaining the favor of Madame de Pompadour. He was very successful in St. Petersburg and later in Berlin, and ended his days in 1780 in the palace of the Landgrave of Hesse Cassel. Saint Germain claimed to be able to make gold and jewels as well as a wonderful elixir which would give to age the beauty and strength of youth, transforming a wrinkled old woman into a blooming maiden of 17 years. He asserted that this elixir had prolonged his own life for many thousands of years, and that he had personally known Christ and the apostles and had enjoyed the intimate friendship of St. Peter. All of these amazing statements met with ready belief. Count of Saint Germain. An amusing dialogue overheard and naively narrated by a chronicler of the Count of Dresden is worth repeating as an illustration of the credulity of even the educated classes of that period. Saint Germain's coachman, being asked if his master were really 400 years old, replied that he could not say of his own knowledge, but that in the 130 years of his service with the Count, his master's appearance had not changed a particle. 130 years of service. That's interesting in itself. Saint Germain, however, was unquestionably a man of profound and extensive knowledge, brilliant intellectual gifts, and astonishing dexterity. Count Lamberg, an apparently trustworthy historian, says that Saint Germain wrote from his dictation 20 lines of a well known poem with the right and left hands simultaneously on two sheets of paper, and that the two manuscripts were so nearly identical that one could not distinguish from the other. Questions and expressions of admiration evoked oracular utterances which increased the charlatan's fame. He proudly owned the lucrative friendship of Madame de Pompadour, an all powerful favorite of Louis XV, to his ability to compound lotions, powders, ointments, and other preservatives of her waning beauty. The high favor in which he stood with the Marchioness and her royal lover is evident by the grant of the magnificent palace of Chambord as a residence and an annual stipend of 100,000 francs. The king even made Saint Germain a secret diplomatic agent, and in 1759 sent him to the Hague to negotiate a loan of 100 million francs, in which mission, however, he was successful. Now, this goes on to a whole nother gigantic page that crisscrosses with some material that's a bit irrelevant to what we're talking about here today. And I probably could have ended at the charlatan part and the Count Saint Germain part, but I just wanted to talk about that because I'm sure many of you are familiar with Saint Germain, or at least some of the stories. My grandfather read me kind of, I wouldn't say they were children's stories, but stories about Saint Germain. Quite interesting, some of the feats he was able to accomplish. And um, I read some interesting things over the years, kind of correlating this idea of vampirism, and that some of these vampires were able to live for you know 1,000 years or more, and that the relation between these types of substances and alchemy and um, are quite interesting, but for another day. So I'm going to stop on this one here, and then I'm going to hop into our last article. Again, knocking at the door of a new world. This was going to be the kind of the thumbnail title of it, but decided to go with the Philosopher's Stone. So to kind of recap again the importance of this first article here, 1913, one of the first um, public representations of the experiments that were going on with um, kind of the early onsets of what radiation was, the half life of radium and radium's effect on other elements, and how they were able to transmute up and down the atomic scale at will. And that the kind of, again, the caption, the dream of this ancient alchemist, now a reality. It certainly was. And they were off and running at this point. And as I've stated before, my medium here is an English written newspaper, but the Germans were openly mining radium as early as 1880. So you can only imagine what kind of experiments and crazy stuff they had been up to. So quite crazy, I'm sure. 154 of you. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sticking with me through these long-winded ones. We got one more doozy here. Um, but yeah, hope you're enjoying this series. And for those of you in chat that have ventured through or been with me through many of these presentations, thank you. And those of you that are new, welcome. The radium subject is quite a rabbit hole, and when it comes to exploring, you know, kind of what happened, so to say, to mankind, um, the reset concepts and these kind of overarching ideas, that's stuff that I cover a lot under the kind of archaeological and geological lens. But radium is going to be a huge proponent when we transition out of the 1800s and into the 1900s, and what comes with wars and world wars and yeah, having some background and understanding. For me, chemistry was something that came kind of naturally to me, but it wasn't ever anything I was really deeply interested in. And sh- looking at things through these lenses from these authors' points of view over 100 years ago, and knowing where they lead us to today, it's quite remarkable. But again, as always, I know how hard it can be to sit here and then listen to me ramble about such a kind of boring, so to say, subject matter. So I appreciate you guys, and yeah, thank you all so much. We're gonna jump into this last one here. Again, knocking at the door of a new world. We're gonna talk about all kinds of things. In this one, this is a great one. I'm gonna read the caption on this picture here, and then we're gonna jump into the material. And then once we get through this, we're gonna call it a night. So probably another half an hour or so. 164. Welcome, welcome. Thank you everybody for being here. Short notice. So the center picture here is primitive man kindles the first fire. What that first fire was to mean to the world, primitive man could not see. To him, fire for its own sake was the big achievement. We stand today where primitive man stood before he had taken his first step toward civilization. Kind of the Prometheus overlays here are really strong in Radium and Prometheus. It's something I've mentioned before. So yeah, what kind of fire are we really talking about? And these gods and Zeus and on and on. But yeah, let's not waste time. Here we go. So like I said, I read it without really seeing. I wasn't sharing, but I was reading you the caption here. It's just two men building fire. What is the human significance of this thimble full of radium? Michelle Brown, wow. Thank you so much. Incredibly generous. I appreciate that very much. Means a lot. Again, as I had already stated, but I said it before many of you were in here. Um, I'm making some big changes in January and kind of rolling out a new version. Not really new version, but some big updates in the first week of February, second week of February. Um, I'm going to be kind of creating a Patreon where people will be able to access material where I can invest a little bit more time and kind of break up some of these longer segments. And yeah, so again, donations like that, they go a long way because every second away from work or family is crucial. So again, not to get off subject, but thank you so very much. It means a lot. So again, what is the human significance of this thimble of radium costing $100,000 that American women have presented to Madame Curie? We have heard, of course, that radium is a cure for cancer, but how many of us realize that this discovery, mainly due to a woman, may change the whole fabric of human history? Now, I've exposed, again, that whole idea of its discovery. It was just rebranded, it was already known of. With the discovery of radium and the wealth of newer discoveries that have followed the recognition and investigation of natural radioactivity, science has crossed a new Rubicon. Today, we are in the presence of a new world, confronted by giant like primary manifestations of energy, which proceed in absolute indifference to any of the pygmy second order influences of the world external to themselves. The old world of chemistry and physics. Yeah, like I said in that previous article, radium is laying the groundwork in the early 1900s for a completely new look at elements and natural, as he said, natural radioactivity and what that means and the effect that it has and how radium at will is birthing all these different um, elements. We stand today where primitive man stood before he had taken the first step in the long upward journey out of barbarism to civilization. Before he had learned the art of kindling fire. Today, only a few pioneering scientists like Madame Curie and the patient investigations of radioactivity, apparently, are aware of the amazing possibilities of an entirely new material civilization suggested by these newly recognized internal stores of energy and matter. This new science may open the gates of a new Garden of Eden. Absolutely. Um, and for those of you that may not be familiar, I've done quite a few talks with Old World Florida on YouTube where we discuss radium and its role that it played in the Garden of Eden. May direct the entire human race to an earthly paradise. May free mankind from the physical struggle of existence and inaugurate an era in which there will be no further need for men and women to earn their bread by the sweat of the brow. Absolutely. We can purify water, we can create endless energy. This kind of Garden of Eden, this radium was low key being talked about that it could revolutionize the entire world and get us out of this kind of slave industrial complex. Reality and myth may exchange places. See, and you go back even to Atlantis, and they discuss this quite openly in some of the more in depth details of Atlantis. That that they had all of these things and more, but it was highbrow. It was it was for the wealthy and up, and that there was still a serfdom kind of and a working class, and these things were only these technologies were only available to the wealthy. I'm sure the same exists today. If humanity learns to draw at will upon a virtually infinite supply of energy, man may truly become gods. If this appears like exaggeration, scientific verification of these views may be found in two recently published works of one of the greatest international authorities on radioactivity, Professor Frederick Soddy. We mentioned him in the last article. These two books are a new and revised edition of the interpretation of radium and the structure of the atom. Long down this radium road, we'll get into these books. They're even more um, dense and hard to read and hard to follow along. and I'll do probably a synopsis video or two on these books. I consider doing an audiobook, but I would stumble literally a million times per page. It's so hard to read, but great material. A collection of papers and addresses presented while this distinguished scientist was professor of chemistry at the University of Aberdeen. To the ordinary non scientific layman, Professor Sadi's interpretation of radioactivity and atomic energy not merely illuminates a new and dazzling future, but opens entirely new vistas of thought concerning our world and our universe. No Jules Verne, no H.G. Wells can quite equal this distinguished and sober scientist in kindling the ordinary imagination. Yeah, and I talk also about John Jacob Astor and his book, where he discusses radium being the key to man exploring the universe. Although his idea of a universe is a closed egg, so very interesting. Um, but yeah, he was a man who was funding studies about propulsion and all these kind of different scientific um, explorations. And he was kind of the first sci-fi writer, believe it or not. And we'll get into his book again later down this Radium series. Every page is radiant, not merely with suggestion and stimulation of thought, but with vision and far-seeing hope. The new science, as interpreted by Professor Sadi, is no mere bread and butter materialism. It is rather the expression of a divine curiosity that may unearth for us unheard of treasuries of energy and create for us a new Eden. Yet he is no Pollyanna of science, but often a trenchant critic of our present apathy to the aims and idols of this divine curiosity. Oh, you donated. Jeez Louise. Thank you. Incredible. Don't know if I'm seeing that twice on accident or not. If not, amazing. Thank you so much. Tracked to Earth, the clue to a great secret for which 1,000 telescopes might have swept the sky forever, and in vain, lay in a scrap of matter, dowered with something of the same inexhaustible radiance that hitherto has been the sole prerogative of the distant stars and the sun. But once this discovery made, the great scientist exclaims with some bitterness, wildcat radium mining schemes are floated. The public are invited to get rich quickly, and every quack and charlatan, with his radium ointment, radium pills, and radium waters, refurbishes his familiar propaganda. Yeah, well said, because a lot of it was absolutely nonsense. And that, I talk about this in my Elixir of Life and um, the Fountain of Youth video, where I discussed the spring water impregnated with radium, and that the recreate radium, when removed from its natural source, loses its potency. I think they said in about 24 hours, maybe a little bit faster than that. So to bottle it and sell it, it has almost no effect. You got to get it from the source, and that's why um, these Roman bathhouses and these saunas and this worldwide conception of sacred waters, steam, um, all of these things had to do with radium. And the first, quote, resorts of America were all based around radium springs. Where was I? Got off my point there. Wildcat. Okay, yeah. Radium pills, blah, blah, blah. The charitable and benevolent, to whom the cry of suffering and the dying ever makes its irresistible appeal, raise the funds to buy the radium. The genuine scientific investigation can no longer afford to, and goes without. Well, and this was kind of the problem that was going on here, was that everything went behind closed doors. Radium's, especially right about now, right in the early 20s, radium goes behind closed doors because the things that they were finding out and experimenting on, it was too much. They couldn't have just your regular Joe Schmo doctor putting radium into horses and then injecting the horse blood into men and creating these super jacked men. It's like steroids, right? You got to work Even though you're taking steroids, you still got to put in the effort. Well, he was taking radium, putting it in horses. The horses, literally within a few hours, were noticeably larger, and their hair looked incredible. I mean, the results were literally nearly instantaneous. He was then injecting this blood into all kinds of animals and men, and was finding insane reactions from this. And there's only so long you can let that happen in a public setting before it goes underground. And that's what was happening here. So, as this gentleman stating that he's claiming that it's due to all these charlatans who are driving the price up, but the reality is radium was becoming more and more scarce. And again, the U.S. government had been letting the Germans mine openly here without even knowing what they were doing for 30 years. So by the time they had kicked them out and got to the mines, oh well, there was there was single digits worth of quantity left. It will be the privilege of American women to remedy this injustice. To Madame Curie, to support the discovery of radium in what Dr. Soddy describes as the modern duel, a struggle which is worldwide and never ending, the struggle against external nature for control and mastery. The millions take no part in it and are hardly aware that it goes on, and would be surprised if they were told that their future fate and prosperity depended upon it rather more intimately than upon the issue of the doughty conflicts of the parliamentarians some of them send up to Westminster. The struggle is by duel rather than by armies, and the issue of the duel the millions accept as blindly and dumbly as a decree of Providence. So, that was a bit long-winded, but essentially he's saying, that all the woes of the world and war and all these things could be solved very simply with this one element. Here is an eloquent tribute to the spirit of the divine curiosity to know, as typified by Madame Curie. To be the first human being to make a discovery of incalculable and possibly never ending consequence to humanity is in itself no mean reward for an investigator, without honor, glory, and power being added. The million others who never make discoveries can never know the mental exaltation, and satisfaction, far above the worth of rubies, that the discoverer in any walk of life experiences. Nevertheless, if science is to be of practical benefit to the million and the means of raising the universal standard of life, it is a simple business proposition to make sure that the scientific investigator is provided with and again, for probably all the way till we get into off this page, I'm going to not be able to read it very clearly. As you can see, it rolls off the page here and lots of words are missing. Pursuit of his proper work. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. For in pure science research, as distinct from applied science, there is apart from its costliness altogether, not even the means of earning a bare subsistence. What, then, are these vistas of new thought that have opened out in all directions since the discovery of radium? That was what we were exploring a bit in the first one. All the discoveries, it was just like a snowball. It was unbelievable. The investigations into radioactivity and the almost incredible exploration of the infinitesimal atom. Absolutely. In consequence of the recent progress in the physical sciences, we find ourselves, replies Soddy, at the pinnacle of one ascent of civilization, taking the first step upward on the lowest plane of the next. Above it still rises the ascent to physical power, far beyond the dreams of mortals in any previous system of philosophy. Well said. And I do, again, strongly suggest that this precipice that we were standing on, where we could have stepped into Eden or out of Eden, so to say, right, metaphorically, led to World War One and this fight over technology that is related again to this radium. A more exalted material destiny than any which have been foretold. Those possibilities are not the promise of another world. They exist in this, to be fought and struggled for in the old familiar way, to be wrung from the grip of nature. As all our achievements in civilization have in the past been wrung by the labor of the collective brain of mankind, guiding, directing, and multiplying the individual's puny power. This is the message of hope and inspiration to the race which radium has contributed to the great problems of existence. The ascent of man has been but one long fight with nature for energy. The struggle for existence is a continuous struggle for fresh physical energy. All around the primitive aboriginal savage existed vast potentialities of food and warmth. He knew not how to use them for his own purposes. It is much the same with us today. Professor Sadi asserts, with all our civilization, we still subsist struggling among ourselves for a sufficiency of the limited supply of physical energy available, while all around are vast potentialities of the means of subsistence we know of from naturally occurring processes, but do not know how to use or control. Radium has taught us that there is no limit to the amount of energy in the world available to support life, save only the limit imposed by the boundaries of knowledge. For the future, an entirely new prospect has been opened. Humanity's inheritance has been infinitely increased. Man's aspirations have been uplifted. His destiny has been ennobled immeasurably. The only real wealth of the world is its energy. By these discoveries, it transpires for the first time that the hard struggle for existence on the bare leavings of natural energy, in which the human race has evolved, is no longer the only possible enduring lot of men. Professor Sadi firmly asserts his belief that men may one day attain the power to regulate those primary fountains of energy which nature now so jealously guards. The most fundamental and important scientific development of the 19th century, in the opinion of Sadi, was the conception of man ascending from the animal world, a creature of hope and promise, with eyes ever forward on the future. Re- Reversing the doctrine of the fall of man, this new mental outlook brought with it the realization that physical strength was borrowed from the innate world and could be augmented therefrom without the agency of life at all. This change was complete and sudden. Physical necessities became a problem, completely apprehended a problem of energy. As time goes on, Sadi tells us inanimate energy will more and more replace animate energy. Absolutely. Represented by man, horse, mule, or ox. Conceivably, some future race of men, instead of sitting down to dinner, will attach themselves to something akin to an electric lamp. We're going to get into that in a future episode. And draw thence from the public mains the supply of pure physical energy required for the day's work without any necessity of absorbing at the same time the useless husks, the material wrappings in which this energy is done up, that constitute our present food. What then, we may ask, is to become of our teeth, our stomachs, our vital organs? But Professor Sadi merely uses this picture to emphasize that now a new factor is at work in the world which alters its whole economy, and in the light of which everything old, whether appertaining to peace or war, to the body or brain or soul, awaits its turn to be re examined and, if found wanting, discarded. Powerful. Standing on the cusp. Big words here for, the early 1900s. But if the discovery of radium and the study of radioactivity light the way to this vision of a future earthly paradise, there are no less penetrating in their illumination of the past, of the world, and our universe. Professor Sadi's picture of the physical universe is not that, for instance, depicted in such a recent work as H.G. Wells' The Outline of His History, a universe in which Mr. Wells says, "There will be a time when the day will be as long as the year is now, and the cooling sun shorn of its beams, will hang motionless in the heavens. Such a conception is contrary to the new science. On the contrary, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. The universe is eternal. The very idea of creation and destruction is drawn from the phenomenon of life, not from the inanimate universe. There is neither beginning nor end. And this overlaps and kind of mirrors really nicely with what they were stating in the previous article. You know, kind of why I use that Ouroboros symbol and why that it was a symbol that existed in alchemy. This kind of continual recycling, so to say, of not only energy and material and elements, but everything. There is neither beginning nor end to our universe or our world. It is immeasurably, incalculably older than former scientists supposed. Our world may as likely be destroyed by fire as suffer the fate formerly predicted by science. That steadily cooling, it would be only a matter of time before our little planet became lifeless and dead. The clock wound up at the beginning to run for a certain time. A universe provided at its creation with a certain store of available energy to dissipate and live by at an ever decreasing rate. Professor Sadi points out until it arrived ultimately and inevitably at the complete physical stagnation and death is being displaced by a less arbitrary view as science advances and invades more and more the vast territories still beyond its ken. It is at least as legitimate to conceive a universe. Why can't I? Sorry. A universe of permanent. Don't know. It's all smudged. Permanent something carrying in its smallest ultimate particles the seeds of its own regeneration. But the linking of the ends of the process together in such a closed cycle still involves the assumption of events unknown and the reversal of the known continuous direction of energy transformations. We are no longer, he reiterates elsewhere, the inhabitants of a universe slowly dying from the physical exhaustion of its energy, but of a universe where of which has in the internal energy of its material components the means to rejuvenate itself perennially over vast periods of time, either intermittently and catastrophically. This is like, you study enough of old philosophy, the Upanishads and Buddha says similar things. Even the metaphors of Christ, they all kind of have this same idea. Whether you call it reincarnation or you look at it as this gentleman does from a chemical, electrical point of view, that we're dealing with a never-ending kind of recycle process, which is the first possibility that presents itself, or continuously in an orderly fashion, if there exist compensating phenomena still outside the ken of science. These conclusions concerning the structure of the universe are based upon detailed study of radioactivity. Again, um, why I've stated so strongly that, I have a video called The Sun, Moon, and Stars, and that they basically were saying that the firmament and the radium, it's just incredible. The realization of this element and all of its effects and um, its ability to produce and reproduce and break down all of the elements that we're aware of were staggering. And again, this detailed study of radioactivity was just the precipice, as this man stated. Today, we know our authorities explain that the radioactive minerals are in reality geological clocks. Indeed, they are. And they record more accurately than in any other way the age of the stratum in which they occur. In a uranium material, for example, each 1% of lead in terms of the quantity of uranium signifies the lapse of a period of 80 million years. Now, I don't agree with these terms at all. In fact, when they were harvesting some of these petrified forests, they were finding quite confusing um, material being presented in these petrifactions that made them look like they were, you know, drastically older than they were. How could a petrified tree on the surface be 10 million years older than a stratum of coal 180 feet below the surface. They're it's the it's the way these materials are broken down. They can be broken down over long periods of time, but they can also be transmuted or broken down over incredibly short periods of time, depending on the energy involved and the way that energy was communicated with the substance. Errors, of course, are possible. If lead should have been an original constituent of the mineral, but these are minimized by taking a large number of different minerals. The carboniferous rock tested by this new method appeared to have an age of some 350 million years. The oldest Archean rocks are of over 1.5 billion years. The evolution, or rather the de-evolution of matter in continuous change, the generation and the destruction of atoms are going on under the eyes of these scientists. These processes involve periods of time so vast, even in the most favorable cases, that the physicists of a generation ago would have dismissed them as physically inconceivable. Yet today, these figures are actually determined by direct measurement in laboratories. Radium and radioactivity have taught science to measure time in terms of millions and billions of years. The discovery that our world is so infinitely more ancient than physical science has hitherto led Professor Soddy to speculate whether humanity shared in this incredibly remote past of the world. Now, I've kind of, again, through much of Anomalous America and some of my other shorter videos, shown quite distinctly that they find human remains in and standing forests and all kinds of singular curiosities in these coal seams that originally they would date at 300,000 years, or longer, and then they find a moccasin. In fact, that's a video I was clipping before we went live here from I believe it was my Anomalous America Ohio episode, but it may have been Indiana, and that's one of many. In coal shafts, they find all kinds of things that absolutely destroy this whole idea of dating in this method. However, the creation and breakdown of radioactive materials, um, they really wouldn't be able to establish a firm idea until about the late 30s. In the light of knowledge acquired through radium and the study of radioactivity, Professor Soddy says some of the old myths and legends take on an uncanny vitality. I mean, I love this. That an ancient mystical symbol of matter known as the Ouroboros, which is a serpent coiled into a circle with the head devouring the tail and bearing the central model, the whole is one, symbolizes, declares Soddy, the evolution of matter. The very latest aspect of evolution. Again, that's the symbol of my channel. Very purposeful. The idea which arises as the most attractive and consistent explanation of the universe in the light of the present knowledge is that matter is breaking down and its energy being evolved and degraded in one part of a circle of evolution. And in another part, still unknown to us, the matter is again being built up with the utilization of the waste energy. Just as we stated in the previous article, that radium, depending on its manipulation, can degrade materials and create materials or birth new ones. If one wished to symbolize such an idea, in what better way could it be done than by the ancient tail devouring serpent? Amen. Sadi considers one of the oldest and most universal of human beliefs that in the Philosopher's Stone, the origin of this legend, no matter how far back we penetrate into the records of the past, we cannot trace to its real source. This stone, it will be remembered, was accredited with the power not merely of transmuting the metals, but of acting as the elixir of life. Now, whatever the origin of this apparently meaningless jumble of ideas, claims Professor Soddy, it is really a perfect and but very slightly allegorical expression of the actual present views we hold today. It requires but little effort of the imagination to see in energy the life of the physical universe and the key to the primary fountains of physical life of the universe. today is known to be transmutation. Yeah, it's happening all around us constantly. Is the association with transmutation and the elixir of life merely a coincidence? I prefer to believe that it may be an echo from one of many previous epochs in the unrecorded history of the world, of an age of men that have trod before the road we are treading today, in a past possibly so remote that even the very atoms of its civilization literally have had time to disintegrate. I theorized in a previous episode when talking about ancestors and ancestor worship and animism, some of these older religions, and especially of the East. Basically, what he just said there really rings true. You know, we are a product of our ancestors, and what does that really mean from this kind of lens? You know, it's far out. It's crazy. From this new point of view, Sadi makes the daring suggestions that their traditional doctrine of the fall of man from a former higher state and the newer scientific view of the continuous ascent of man to the present level are by no means as irreconcilable as they have heretofore appeared. Judging from the accomplishments of modern engineers with the comparatively restricted supplies of energy, a race which could transmute matter might transform desert continents. Thaw, important part, and we're going to get into this more in later episodes, thaw the frozen poles and make the whole world one smiling garden of Eden. Possibly they could explore the outer realms of space, immigrating to more favorable worlds, as the superfluous today immigrate to more favorable continents. The legend of the fall of man possibly may be all that has survived of such a time before. For some unknown reason, the whole world plunged back again under the undisputed sway of nature to begin once more its upward, toilsome journey through the ages. Humanity has inhabited this planet for millions, not merely thousands of years past. Of all these millions of years, myths and legends record only the latest moment. This idea may seem, Sadi admits, a fanciful one, but he recommends it to those who study ancient mythologies and the origins of human beliefs, as do I. When we stop to consider that the power by which we live and move and have our being is none other than that which drives on the stars in their courses and maintains their splendors over the long epochs of cosmical time, as above, so below, right? When we consider the science can take this power wherever it is found in fuel, waterfall, or sunshine, and can use it to do the work of men, we can gain some insight into the nature of the ancient gods. A simple people who confused power with deity, like the ancient Greeks or primitive Vikings would have seen, explains our authority in this control of the powers of nature, the act of a god, and from their point of view, it truly is the most godlike achievement man has ever accomplished. The ancient problems of the philosopher's stone and the efforts of the alchemist to transmute baser metals into gold are also viewed in a new light. Whether these ideas are the inventions of charlatans, as is commonly supposed, or whether they are the distorted, parrot like repetitions of the wisdom of a lost Atlantis, the well informed would now dare not say. Today, modern science sees in the power to affect the transmutation of elements the power to prolong the physical welfare of the community for long periods. The achievements of science and civilization in the last 100 years or so strike Saudi as a sudden forward leap, apparently unconnected with and certainly not culminating necessarily out of the periodic ebb and flow of human fortune. It is the work of a mere handful of men. This fact inspires Saudi's optimism for the future of humanity, but it also throws new light on the past, the unending, unexplored past. Nothing but the most sublime egoism, he explains, the unconscious, constitutional disability of the natural man to conceive of a universe not revolving around himself can make it appear improbable that what occurred so suddenly and mysteriously in the last few centuries of recorded history may not have occurred before, not once, but perhaps many times during the vastly longer period of which no record has yet been interpreted. It is only right to consider the possibility that the command exercised over nature in the 20th century may have been attained, possibly exceeded previously. I agree. Whatever view we take, now just think of this from the Tartaria lens, you guys, right? Everyone's looking at these civilizations, these buildings we can't explain who came before us, right? We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And there is a cyclical nature to it all. You know, the clock repeats. It just starts at its 12 and it keeps going. Whatever view we take of the rigmarole of the alchemical charlatans of the Middle Ages, the fact remains that those new scientists of radium and radioactivity would ascribe to the problem of the ultimate constitution of matter and the practical achievement of the problem of the transmutation of elements an importance and significance that cannot but be flattering to the instincts of the human mind, over which these problems have for so long exerted such powerful fascination. The physical impossibility of one era becomes the commonplace of the next. No theory can claim a universal application. It is, of necessity, partial. Well said. Saudi qualifies and bounded on all sides by the unknown and the unexplored. But radium teaches us that we are held back only by our own ignorance or complacency in the growing conquest over nature. Radium is unique among the elements, not because it is dowered with an exceptional potentialities or because it contains any abnormal store of internal energy which other elements do not possess, but simply and solely because it is changing comparatively rapidly while the elements hitherto known are changing imperceptibly. The truer view, we read, is that this one element has clothed with its own dignity the whole empire of common matter. Again, I'm going to read that again because it's like kind of the exclamation mark of this article. The truer view, we read, is that this one element has clothed with its own dignity the whole empire of common matter. Whew. The aspect, thanks for sticking with me, guys. We're almost to the end here. Appreciate you all so much. Long winded, I know, but man, hope you're enjoying this. The aspect with which matter has presented to us in the past is but a consummate disguise, concealing latent energies and hidden activities beneath a hitherto impenetrable mask. The ultra material potentialities of radium are the common possessions of all that world to which in our ignorance we used to refer as mere inanimate matter. This is the weightest lesson. Sorry, it's kind of washed out there. Weightest lesson the existence of radium has taught us. Wait, I don't know. Greatest this internal store of energy we learned of for the first time in connection with radium is possessed to a greater or less degree by all elements in common and is part and parcel of their internal structure. The certain of the 20th century by these discoveries, Curtin, has thus been rung up upon a mighty transformation scene. Our century has opened with the transformation of the most fundamental and permanent of the existences which physical science has in the past recognized. Today, this transformation has extended beyond physical science and transfigures with new light the most fundamental and permanent ideas, which, in one form or another, are the most deep rooted in the philosophies of the world. Well said. The greatest present need is to support research, to keep alive the spirit of divine curiosity, as Professor Sadi names the scientific spirit, irrespective of its immediate benefits to humanity at large. This is the spirit of which Madame Curie was presented with her gift of radium. The true scientist, we read on, is a pioneer. See, and even he stated it, right? She was gifted these substances, right? She wasn't out in the field just finding stuff, and she was gifted these things in a purified form. The true scientist, we read on, is a pioneer. He sets forth into an unknown land, not to discover anything definite, anything of use to anyone, but to discover what there is in the unknown to be discovered. However apparently commonplace and unimportant it may seem, the grandeur, the discovery, the more trivial and utterly useless it often appears at first sight. The commonest and the most ordinary phenomenon to which the eyes of humanity have become so accustomed as to be hardly consciously aware of it. And then it gets cut off. But I wanted to go back real quick and read this again. This internal store of energy we learned of for the first time in connection with radium is possessed to a greater or less degree by all elements in common and is part and parcel of their internal structure. And yeah, I know it's kind of frustrating, but basically, he's just kind of um, s- daydreaming about what's to come in science and where these radium experiments are going to lead. And yeah, so this is 1921. Radium has now been um, not a household, but from a scientific point of view, for 13 years, it's been out in the open, so to say. And by this time frame already, he's saying that it's become so expensive that it's been completely removed from the public sector. And by 1930, you're never going to see any new science being explored, at least in the public realm. And I don't think that's a coincidence. But yeah, that sums up the articles for tonight. And again, I want to thank you all so much for sticking with me through these. And, you know, almost breaking 200 means a lot. Impromptu live stream. So the takeaways from these papers here. Again, the dream of the ancient alchemists now a reality. Um, and the idea of the radioactivity and the half life and breakdown of the chemical structure of things. We've covered so much from crazy scientific experiments to reviving creatures with radium to superhumans to growing giant frogs to feed mankind. Um, to in this one where he even postulates that eventually radium will power a network where humans won't even eat food. They'll just merely grab onto an object, so to say, and they'll absorb all the energetic energy that they need. And yeah, incredible. Professor William Ramsey and Sadi, two incredible gentlemen. I've mentioned both of them in several of these articles. Um, but yeah, let's roll through chat a little bit since when I get through these long-winded things, I do a horrible job of responding to everybody. Um, Brett, love you, Brett. Good to see you. Crypto Alchemist, thanks for being here. Lenny Time, lots to think about. Walter Russell's on my, yeah, Walter Russell's incredible. Lenny, good to see you, brother. Thanks for being here. Joe Cool, good to see you. It's been a long time. Holding down, holding down the chat for me. Robert Lawson, good to see you. Happy New Year. Yes, absolutely. Happy New Year, everybody. What's everyone thinking of this stuff? Kind of changing the viewpoint of kind of these old alchemical papers, and I love this guy. This last one here, he did such a fantastic job crossing so many different platforms. Right, he's talking about the same things I've been saying: myth and legend and symbology, and it's just incredible. You know, he's talking about these kind of like sci-fi ideas that are extenuating from these radium experiments, and that H.G. Wells and many of these other people, Jules Verne, and the overlaps with some of these stories and in the Atlantean narratives and steampunk, whatever, Tartaria, whatever your viewpoint is, the radium lens is really a powerful one. Speaking of Tartaria, the Antiquitech episode is stands out to me from that point of view. But yeah, I'm just gonna roll up the chat here. Oh, Jillian, thank you. Yeah. Um, Supporting me being here, talking in chat, however you choose to do so, I appreciate. I'm grateful for it. 2023 coming to an end. JJ Organics, thanks for being here. Amy, Pole Shift. Oh, did you tapping the thumbs up? Yeah, thanks, Joe. Trump 2020. We're attacking from every possible because we're attacking. Huh. Yeah, I'm going to I'm late using all lives today. Crazy race. Yeah. Really gonna look forward to the comments on this one. Um, you know, the whole mythos concept and the gods and so forth. And again, I really, I recommend so many of my videos throughout these things, but the Scarab video is really just keeps coming to my mind. I think that would connect a lot of dots for people, and it certainly did for me. But I'm gonna sign off here by reading this little excerpt here that I already read twice, but it just is so incredible. Um, and yeah, it'll be the last time you hear from me live. I'm going to kick off New Year's with a special New Year's calendar review where we talk about the adding of months and the manipulation of time and calendars and so forth. I'm going to try and have that video out on the 1st of January. Should be no problem, but we'll see. I was going to do a live, but just with time and everything, I just don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah, signing off with this little quotation here, guys. The truer view we read is that, excuse me, that's annoying. The truer view we read is that this one element has clothed with its own dignity the whole empire of common matter. The power of radium, and more to come, as always, in this radium series. Thank you all so very much for being here tonight. Impromptu. Can't believe we pretty much hit 200 with, no heads up. So, love you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. And like always, if you have questions or comments, I look forward to reading them. And stay tuned for more big announcements to come. Love you guys. Happy 2023. See you next year. Bye.